I want you to picture this. An army trapped deep inside enemy territory. They're starving, they're exhausted, and they are outnumbered at least 3-1. Their only choice? Turn and fight. And this isn't some made-up story. This is the real history of the Battle of Crécy, one of the most incredible underdog victories of all time, and we're going to break down exactly how they pulled it off.
So the scene is set. August 26, 1346, a small English army led by King Edward III has been backed into a corner near Crécy in northern France, and bearing down on them is the full might of the French kingdom, a gigantic force of mounted knights who are absolutely sure they're about to win. What happens next? Well, it literally changes warfare forever.
So you gotta ask, how on earth did this happen? How did this ragged, cornered army not just survive, but hand a crushing defeat to a force that was so much bigger? The answer? It's this incredible mix of technology, tactics, and honestly a series of catastrophic mistakes.
Okay, before we even get to the victory, you have to understand just how desperate the situation was for the English. They weren't just outnumbered. They were at the very end of a brutal campaign, and they were right on the brink of total collapse.
For weeks, Edward's army had been just tearing a path of destruction through France. They sacked towns, burned villages, and got right up to the gates of Paris. But all the while, the French army, led by King Philip VI, was hunting them down, chasing them relentlessly. Eventually, they trapped them against the River Somme. With their supplies gone and morale hitting rock bottom, the English were facing annihilation.
This map really puts the scale of the chase into perspective. After landing in Normandy, you can see the English line just snaking its way through hostile territory. And you see this spot right here at the Somme? That's where they get trapped. But then, in this totally desperate last-ditch move, they find a tidal crossing, fight their way over, and just barely escape the French army nipping at their heels.
Their escape bought them a little breathing room, but that was it. They were just too exhausted to keep running. Edward knew their only chance for survival, their only chance, was to stop, pick their ground, and get ready for a fight that, by all accounts, they had no business winning.
All right, so this sets the stage for the two armies that are about to collide. On paper, this shouldn't even be a contest. I mean, it's a classic David versus Goliath story. But the thing is, the English had a secret weapon and a kind of discipline that the French just didn't.
Let's break this down. The French had at least double, maybe even triple the number of men, a glittering, massive army of aristocratic knights. The English, a much smaller group, but they were mostly professional soldiers, veterans. They were disciplined, and they had the longbow. And this table just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's French feudal might versus English professional grit and better tech.
Now this really gets at the heart of the technology here. On one side, you've got the English arrow with its nasty, armor-piercing bodkin point. And on the other, you've got the Genoese crossbowmen, expensive mercenaries the best money could buy. But here's the kicker. Their weapon was slower, it didn't have the range, and it was about to become totally, utterly useless. And here's why. The English longbow wasn't just a fancy stick, it was a devastating weapon system. I mean, it took basically a whole lifetime of constant practice to get good at this thing, but a skilled archer could fire off arrows 3 times faster than a crossbowman. Just try to picture that. Thousands of men unleashing a storm of armor-piercing arrows every few seconds. That's what the French were about to charge straight into.
So, let's talk about the battle itself. What unfolds isn't some heroic, glorious charge. It's more like a cascade of disaster, where every single move the French make just digs their hole even deeper.
First off, the English picked the perfect spot. King Edward set his army up on this gentle slope. His guys? They're rested, they've eaten. The French, on the other hand, are just arriving after a long, exhausting march, and now they have to charge uphill into muddy ground straight into the teeth of the English defense. And get this, the English had even dug little pits all over the place to trip up the French horses.
The French attack is basically a masterclass in how not to fight a battle. It all starts with an archery duel. Right before it kicks off, a sudden rainstorm hits, which may have slackened the crossbow strings. Either way, the Genoese are totally outranged, and they just get torn to shreds by the English longbows. So what do? They turn and run. And the arrogant French knights, calling them cowards, charge right through their own retreating men. It creates absolute chaos before they even reach the English lines. Then their whole charge gets broken up by the mud, the slope, and that relentless storm of arrows that just slaughters their unarmored horses.
And for the few knights who actually made it through all that to the English lines, the fighting was just savage.
I mean, listen to how a chronicler at the time described it. Murderous, without pity, cruel, and very horrible.
But here's the thing. Despite the absolute carnage, the French nobility just refused to give up. They kept charging, again and again, late into the night. This is where we get that famous and honestly tragic story of the blind King John of Bohemia. He literally had his men tie his horse's bridle to theirs so he could charge into the battle one last time. He and all his men, they were killed.
Just think about that for a second. As many as 15 separate cavalry charges, and every single one ended in disaster. It was a staggering display of bravery, for sure, but also a tragic failure to adapt, to see that your tactics just are not working. Their courage was immense, but it was no match for a good defensive position and superior firepower.
So, when the sun finally came up the next morning, the true scale of the French disaster became horrifyingly clear. The aftermath of Crécy sent absolute shockwaves across Europe.
Just look at this chart. The difference in the losses, it's just unbelievable. The English, they lost maybe a couple hundred guys tops. The French, thousands. And that includes over 1,500 knights and lords, the absolute flower of their nobility, just wiped out in a single afternoon.
And you have to understand, this was so much more than just one victory. Crécy crippled the French army, which allowed Edward to go on and capture the super important port of Calais, which England would then hold for the next 200 years. It established the longbow as the king of the European battlefield, and it proved once and for all that a disciplined army of common soldiers with superior technology could defeat a much larger aristocratic force.
And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. Crécy wasn't just a battle, it was a revolution. It signaled that the 1,000-year reign of the armored mounted knight was coming to an end. It was replaced by organized infantry and deadly missile weapons. This was the bloody birth of a new way of war.